Hello from sunny Boston, Massachusetts, and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and we have got a presentation today that deals with both Alpha Anywhere and Alpha Transform. We're also here to answer questions, so if you do have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You could also send questions to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about Alpha Transform, and specifically we were talking, and for those of you who don't know what Transform is, Transform, it's a system that composed of a mobile app, a web app, and a web portal that allows you to build some very sophisticated data entry forms that are so sophisticated that we often refer to them as applications themselves. We've done lots of demos on Transform here over the years. And recently we have come out with a free tier of Alpha Transform for those of you who'd like to play around with it sort of on a hobby basis or to experiment maybe before you start using it in real work or just because you'd like to. We have lots of small projects that people have done successfully with it. You can go get your free account at transform.alphasoftware.com. So people do in fact use Alpha for real work, and what they use it for often is in manufacturing quality situations. And so what they'll do is they'll have people out on the work floor, just making sure machines are operating as they should be, everything is set up correctly, and basically there's a payoff to that in that you don't lose raw materials, you don't have mistakes, but we'd like to show and demonstrate to people how much of a payoff that is. So we build a return on investment calculator that our salespeople can use when trying to sort of explain the benefits of the deal. So at first, our salesperson, we'll call this guy Daryl, for example, he happens to have a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet is just something where he did sort of back of envelope where he looks at what the costs are when something doesn't go right in the quality department. So that might be downtime costs where you have people sitting around and will then have to make up for it in overtime hours later on. Sometimes there's cost of rework. Maybe the thing isn't destroyed or damaged, but it requires, but it didn't come out right from the assembly line and they need to spend some money to make it right. There's cost of scrap materials, there's cost of returns, overtime costs, costs of printing, and of course, cost of data entry if you have a system in which the stuff is collected on paper, which a lot of it is, and then having to be rekeyed. So we thought about, wouldn't it be cool if instead of just this Transform ROI calculator, it would be possible to have a Transform example itself. So the idea would be that our salesperson talks to our prospect on the phone. If they had a form that they could fill this out on, share that form with the prospect, and have it generate a fancy Transform ROI report. So this is really the only thing you haven't seen since 2 weeks ago is this report over here. It looks like that's coming through now. Okay, wonderful. So as is, and we've got, like I said, we have icons on it. We've got some colors. We've got some formatting. So the question is, how do we get this over here on the left to turn into this over here on the right? And today I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's go ahead over into Alpha Transform. I'm actually going to switch computers here, and I'm in one of my free Transform accounts, the Transform Users Guide account. That's what I've called it for today's episode. And I have got what's called here an onSubmit event. So my onSubmit event right now runs a report, and it runs a report when a form called TFROI, and that was the form that we built a couple weeks ago with TPL to do our calculations. I'll show that to you again just to jog your memory. Go ahead and grab that form definition. Okay, so here's what it looks like here. And if I double click on it, you'll be able to see here are all the fields that I used. I had fields for rework, fields for scrap, fields for returns, and so on. So I wanted to take all that data and combine it down into a report. Now, the way you define a report in Alpha Transform is you do it using basically templating, HTML templating. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the JSON view of this report. So this is actually what Transform actually uses when it goes and does it. So it creates this big JSON object here. It's which indicates who it's going to, who it's from, under what conditions it should be sent, and so on. And then there's the template, which describes what the thing should look like. Now, this is kind of readable, I guess, if you were very, very technical, but you could never really create a report using that kind of format. So we do, in fact, have a builder. That builder is not currently built into Alpha Transform. Instead, it's built into our companion product, Alpha Anywhere. You can get Alpha Anywhere, the Community Edition, which will be work fine for that. Whoops. Directly from our website at no charge. You just go over to our homepage and choose Build Low-Code Apps for free. That's Alpha Anywhere as opposed to Alpha Transform. When you click on that, I think it's just you click the button again, and a little form pops up. You fill in the form and submit it, and you will get an installer. When that installer is run, you're going to have the Alpha Anywhere installer run. So you're going to see this little icon called Install Alpha Anywhere. You can click on that. It will install the software for you. Now, when you first open up Alpha Anywhere for the first time, I'm just going to close out of here. It's going to be blank. It's going to ask you to create a new workspace, which you can do. I've already created a workspace, so I'm just going to open the one that I was just using right here. And it will bring you to what's called the Web Projects Control Panel when you open it up. Now, this is where you can build a completely full-featured Alpha Anywhere application. But today, we're not going to be using it for that. We're instead going to be just using one tool in the Alpha Anywhere suite. And we're going to find that up here on the Tools menu. So under Tools, I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to select More. And then I'm going to select Transform Utilities, and then I'm going to choose Builder for Transform on Submit Event. Hang on a second. Let me just pop back open my GoToMeeting interface just to make sure I haven't lost you guys. GoToMeeting, where did you go? There we go. You should be seeing cows in the background now. All right, good. Looks like I haven't lost you. Nice. All right, I'm going to go back into my machine here. Okay. And I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, so this actually connects up to my Alpha Transform account. If you remember that JSON object I showed you just a second ago, I'm going to go ahead and fetch that JSON object from my Transform account, put it in here in Alpha Transform, and it's going to do something cool. It's going to parse it for me and put it into a builder so I can actually edit it as a human, not as a computer. So to do that, I'm going to click the Fetch Definition from Transform Central link. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to ask me for my API key. I can get my API key right in Transform Central itself. Whoops, pop over here to Transform, and I just go over to Get API Key, and then I select the type of API key I want. You can use a Read Data one. You click the Get API Key button. Something will pop up here. You can copy it. That's how you get your key. So you get it right here on that home page. All right, so let's pop back to Alpha Anywhere. Let's pop back to the right version of Alpha Anywhere. And I've put in my API key. So I'm going to say, go ahead and fetch the definition. So I'm going to go fetch the definition. And you'll see, in fact, I do have one action created. That is the Transform ROI report. Now, before I dive into this and show you how that works, I want to show you what would happen if you wanted to create a new report from scratch, because there's certain things that you pretty much always have to set up. When I'm done showing you that, we will dive back into this, and I'll show you how I put the template together. So to create a new action here, and a report is just one of them, all I do is I click the Add Action button, and you'll see my actions are listed here. I can send an email, I can send a report, which is what we're doing today. I can post data, so that can be sent to a webhook or some third-party service. You can send it directly to a SQL database. You can send SMS messages. You can set values in user fields. In other words, make changes to values in a form after it comes through. Maybe you'll do some calculations after the fact or something like that. You can set form status. You can use our dispatch and routing system, which we've talked about in a different thing, and set that up here. And then you can also save the form in storage. That includes things like Dropbox and Amazon S3, so that you have a copy of it somewhere else. Let's take a look at report, because that's the one we're going to focus on now. And when we go to report, you're going to see that it's just basically created a little stub here called report. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that action. And when I edit the action, it's going to ask me for two things. It's going to want the transform ID, or in other words, what form do I want it running against, which I can select here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to say that is the one I want. In fact, my account only has one form, so it makes it a little easier. But if you had multiple, that's how you choose. So I'm going to click OK. All right. But the next thing I need to do when I'm creating my report is I want to work with some sample data. So to do that, I'm going to click the Define Sample Data button up here. And then what it's going to do, I've already done this before, which is why it's filled in, but this would typically be blank. It's going to let me choose the form instance I'm interested in. So I'm going to click Select here. I think I have, maybe I just have one. Oh, I just have one. I just have one instance. So that's pretty easy. That's the instance I'll select. And so I've pre-created a form instance. I've already filled out one instance of that form in Transform. And I made sure to fill in all of the fields so that they all appear here in the form data. It's going to be helpful for me later on when I'm laying out the report to make sure that I have all of my fields there. Okay, so that's all in place. I've got my sample data. I've told Transform what form I want to use. And now there are just some more of these that we basically fill out all the way until we get back down to where it says template. And template is where we're going to be defining our report. And we're going to spend a little time talking about that in just a moment. To start with, where you send the report to, this used to be hard-coded until just recently, or it had to be static, but right now you can actually specify where it's going to in a couple different ways. So when I click this smart button over here, you'll see I can still hard-code it to an explicit value. Like I could type in dave@alphasoftware.com, for example, and it would always go to me. Or I could use JavaScript to calculate that, or I could use TPL to return the value of, say, a field. And that's actually what I'm going to do. So because I've told it what transform ID I've got, I already have sample data in, I can choose Insert Transform Field. And now I get a choice between form fields and meta fields. So you might choose meta fields if you're looking for the one at the person, for example, who's assigned to the form. You could choose person right here, and it would insert their email address. But in my form, I actually have a user form, a regular form, if you will, that's got a couple of email addresses in it called send to email and these two. So I can grab one of these. Let's say my send to email to, and I can insert that, and now it knows where it's going. The from address, you could do this as an explicit value, or again, you could calculate it from TPL code, but it's probably going to be explicit value. It's probably going to be like, this is ROI report from Transform System or something like that. Display name, well, you're familiar with email, how your URL or how the actual email address and the display name can be slightly different. You can put in a different display name here. You can put in a subject here. Again, the subject could be calculated, if you thought that would be helpful. And then you could choose the send format. This needs to return either HTML or PDF. Today I was working it in a PDF, so I left that alone. Message body, you can put in, hey, attached is your report, just go take a look at it, whatever. And you can do that again using one of these three methods, JavaScript, TPL, or explicit values. So a lot of flexibility here. You can give a name to the attachment. You can call it like my report, whatever. And then if you're doing, and then I think that's about it. You don't need to actually send in your Spark Post or SendGrid key unless you start doing very high volumes. We may ask you to switch over to your own key, but if you leave that alone, we'll automatically put one in for you. And then this is where it gets interesting, the template type. So again, I can say it's custom or it's transform. If I chose transform though, it would want a transform ID, and it would basically create a report very much like my form definition. But that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to be building out my own template. So I'm going to choose template, and this is going to open up a template builder. Now you'll notice that this has already got a template built for me. It's just a dummy template, but my data is already in here. Acme Anvil Corporation. These are some of the values that I had filled out in that field. Here's dave@alphasoftware.com. That's that email address that was there. And you can see that to create my template, all I'm doing is I'm just inserting a bunch of form fields here, as well as some HTML to create the template that I want. but I want to talk a little bit more about that creation process today, because there are a couple ways to go about doing it. I'm going to go ahead and close out of here, and I'm going to cancel, and I'm actually going to delete that particular action because I don't want to use it. Let's go take a look at the one that I have already baked for us. I'm going to go into Edit Action, and I've already set up my sends and froms and all that, and I'm going to come down to my template, and I'm going to click Template. And you should be able to see that I've got now a preview that looks somewhat similar to what I showed you earlier in the PowerPoint presentation. It does calculations and so on. And I want to show you how I put this together. So there's about 5 things that I think that you should know. The first is that I decided to use tables when doing this in my HTML. Now, tables, interestingly enough, have fallen out of favor on websites to a large extent, and that's because websites are now designed to work on screens of various sizes, phones and tablets and laptops, whatever. But in the case of our report, we know we're doing this basically for print. We already know that this is going to be a standard size. In fact, we've predefined our paper size up here. This can, of course, be predefined to any size. So this happens to be the American letter size. It can be changed for A4 European size, however you want. You can adjust that up there. As I put this together, here are the values that I used that I found worked pretty well. I decided to set the entire report itself, like the widest part would be the header, and that was going to be 800 pixels wide. So I just hard-coded it at that. So that's actually I found to be a pretty good thing, and that would probably fit on A4 letter as well. And then in here, I basically just inserted an image, and that image, I did it just by using an image tag. That image is actually just the logo directly from the Transform website. And so I put that up there. The rest of it was the name of my report, but I also made it smart. Instead of saying this is just a Transform ROI report, I said it's a Transform ROI report for, and then I inserted a field. The field is got the name of the company that it's for. Now, if you recall 2 weeks ago when I said you're building Transform forms, what's a really good practice when you're putting in fields? Name your fields is what I said. And what have I done? I have not named my field something appropriate. My company name field is called field 1. Don't do what I did. Because when you go to insert a field, it's so much easier if you've labeled them properly. I'm going to go click insert a field so you can see how that's done. And you'll see it's just got all of my internal form field names here. The first one, field 1, happens to be company name. The other ones, I remember what these acronyms are for because I set them up, but these I wouldn't have remembered offhand. So anyway, I did insert that. So that's how it knows to automatically say Transform Form 4, and then this is the name of the company, the Acme Anvil Company. Now, ignore the fact that there is a line through here. I don't know what's going on with that. The thing still prints out correctly, and this view is actually just fine, I would say, for working. Now, as you'll notice, I did a lot of the HTML, this is all HTML that I put in, and I actually just built the HTML right here in the editor. I like the way that it handled tabs. I like the way that it handled color coding. I like the way it did auto-suggest. But you certainly don't have to use our editor. If you wanted to use a different editor or have someone create an HTML report template for you, you could do it in anything. You just want to paste it in here. After you've pasted it in, though, you'd want to replace where the fields with the placeholder fields. So in other words, you would paste it in, you'd go find the fields in your report, and you'd use insert field to replace all of the fields as you go. All right, so I think I've explained that to death. Let's move on to the next section. The next section, I decided that I was going to have a series of these repeating sections, one for each one of my categories. And I've inserted a graphic. So a graphic can be inserted in a couple of ways. You could do it as inline base64 encoded graphic, but that's going to take up a ton of room here, and it's not going to make it easy to see. You could do it as an SVG, which these would have probably been looked better at as an SVG because they resize very nicely. As an SVG, you can embed those, but I didn't do that. Instead, I just went old school. These are actually hosted up on a server. So when this report is compiled, it's going to pull down those image names and add it into my PDF for me. So here's my first one. It's called the stop icon small. It's this hand that's saying stop. That's one of my icons. Next icon down here, rework icon small. There's my little hammer and wrench icon. And the nice thing is, as I put it in, I got to tweak and see how did I really like it. When I first put it in, I thought that an image of around, oh, I don't know, 100 pixels by 100 pixels would have been about right. It turns out that was a little too big. So like if I put in 100, you'll see it just kind of dominated the whole report. It looked kind of dumb. So the nice thing is you can kind of experiment in this view and get it to look just as you like it. After that was that, I just went through regular table basic HTML stuff for everything, inserting fields as I needed. But when I got to here, these totals, for example, and actually even the percentage, I decided that I wanted to format those a little differently. For example, I wanted to put in commas because that's our decimal separator here. I could have used a period or something else. I wanted to add a $sign, and I wanted to give it 2 significant digits there at the end. So to do that, I use a type of format directive, which I'm going to show you how to use in a moment. And then for the one for the percentage, all I did was I just stuck the percentage sign right next to the field. So it's always going to have a percentage sign hanging out there. Okay, so how did I know that that's how you do that? I'm going to actually close out. Actually, I'm going to say load example. When I load example, it's going to remove everything that's here. So do be careful if you've got stuff. I've already saved this. I'm not going to save it again, but let's hit load example because I want to show you some cool stuff in here. You'll see select example. It shows you a whole bunch of different things that you might do when putting together a template for your report. But one of them had to do with using number and date formatting in a template, which is cool. So I went ahead and I selected that one, and it's going to blow away everything I've got here, but I knew that. Bang. And now it's actually even replaced my sample data as well, which is fine. And it shows me how to do the formatting. So if I said, I want to know, how did I do this salary here, for example, you'll see that it's salary, which is the name of the field, followed by this part here, number, open paren, single quote, $, pound, comma, pound, period, 00, single quote, and close. And that formats it that way. I think you can do neat things like if I remove the $, and you'll see no $, it just says it without it. So you can kind of get a feel for how those work. This one is for a phone number field. I think that's kind of cool. And that shows you how to do it. This is for a date field. Shows you a way to do it using dates. Of course, you could do DDMMYYY if you wanted to. So this is one of the many examples in here of how to build things. It also shows you how to do things like if we had data groups, and we had basically nested objects, and we had objects that had objects within objects. We could display those, and that give you an example of how that's done. So these are really, really good for learning how to do stuff. I didn't really have to do much for the report I wanted. I just needed to learn how to set up that object formatting. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to cancel out of here so as not to save that. And we're going to pop back in here. Okay, so for the icons I've explained, you want to put them up on the internet somewhere just so that the report thing can get to it. Just putting it in your project is probably not going to be sufficient because you don't necessarily know. This might be running, because this will be running on our transform system and it may not know where the image is. So it's best to either embed the image or put it in a publicly available URL like I've done here. The next thing I wanted to show you, I've shown you how to get the sample data. I've shown you format directives. I think that's largely it then. So as I went down here, I just basically created a bunch of tables, put in fields, and then when I was done, I was able to print that out. Now, one cool thing that you could do here is you could show the raw HTML here, which I'm going to do, and you can actually copy that into a file. And then if you wanted to, you could paste that into something like I did here with my ROI.html file. And what that will let me do is just make a quick prototype that I can then view. So I'm going to say, go ahead and open that with, I don't know, let's say Edge. So Edge should open that. Oops, here it is. close that. And it shows me how it works. Now, some of my formatting I noticed wasn't preserved. I'm going to go look in and see why that is the case. It does look a little different than what I had here. And that's because it seems to, at the moment, be ignoring my CSS for some of the styles that I defined. Of course, I could always do that as an inline style, but I'll figure out what that issue is and explain it to you next time. All right, so that pretty much covers what I wanted to go over today. Let's take a look here and see what the questions are. One is a question from Terry. Terry, I'll contact you just after this call. Let's see. And someone says, I'm really confused. The last 2 times I joined, it shows transform and not alpha. Did alpha meetings change to another day? They did not. Alpha meetings and alpha transform meetings are both on Wednesdays. We tend to alternate them, although I guess we do go a little heavier on Alpha Anywhere. So if you missed last week's session, it was Alpha Anywhere based. It was actually very cool with Lee Vasic showing off a bunch of new features that had just been released in Alpha Anywhere. You'll be able to find that on our YouTube channel. As well as the other things. We have playlists for our Wednesday webinars. Any other questions here? No, it doesn't look like it. All right, wunderbar. I will talk to you guys next week. We'll be back at it with another Alpha Anywhere, this time with an Alpha Anywhere session. Until then, take care, stay well, and also send any questions you want to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks, bye-bye.